Hello, biology students. Today you are going to be taking notes on how evolution happens. So as a reminder, our big question is, how do populations of organisms change over time? The assessment you'll be taking, not today, but in 2 classes, will be answering that question in your own words, and next class you'll practice, do a test review. This is what your notes look like. They're in Schoology, so you'll be writing down a definition for natural selection and then a definition for the 4 principles of evolution, and then giving an example of your own, of an animal or a plant. So I'll point out when to write these definitions down. This says natural selection explains how evolution can happen. This is a picture of Darwin, Charles Darwin, who you read about, who came up with the theory. This is just a whole bunch of organisms. You can see these insects obviously fit their environment to blend in. And then this is the idea that we have a common ancestor as a monkey, but we did not evolve from monkeys. And then these are the birds that Darwin studied, their beaks being well suited to the environment where they live. Definition of evolution: life changes over time. I'm going to go through some of these slides kind of quickly, but just so you can see them. We already read about this and learned about what Darwin saw. He noticed things. He noticed variation. Some tortoises had long necks, some had short necks. That is called variation differences. He noticed that those differences matched the environment. So the tortoises that live in areas with tall plants have long necks, and the tortoises with shorter necks live in an area with low plants so that they can eat and survive. Adaptation allows you to survive. So that word survive and adaptation should be tied together in your brain. It's whatever an organism has that lets them live. This is just kind of a reminder that Darwin saw fossils, and that gave us evidence that evolution had occurred and is occurring. I gave you the examples of the peppered moth before as evidence that life changes. Here's the light colored one. You can kind of see. This one obviously has the variation that lets it survive. So the color, light color, is the adaptation. Your reading talked about artificial selection that we humans do. We choose the traits to allow the organisms to do best. So like the biggest cows, the juiciest tomatoes. That compared with natural selection is the environment chooses. So here's kind of what happens. We compete to survive. So here are 4 giraffes. The one with the shorter necks probably won't do as well as the one with the longer necks. So the genes that this long-necked giraffe gets will be passed on to its babies. If those babies have long necks, they'll live and they'll pass down their genes to their babies. Offspring is a fancy word for babies. How? With their DNA. Their DNA gets passed down to the next generation. This definition is what you're going to write in the box that says natural selection. This is the long one sentence, It says if you have something that allows you to survive, a trait that suits your environment, like a beaver's sharp teeth, like a polar bear's white fur, like the jaguar's big jaw, like the stickleback having no spines, that allow you to survive and reproduce better. So that's what natural selection says. This caption on the bottom says, natural selection does not give you what you need. You either have it or you don't. So that pink sentence goes there. The 4 principles of natural selection are here. in your notes: variation, overproduction, adaptation, descent with modification. So here's your definition for variation that you're going to write down in that box right here. It's differences. If you think of variation, think of difference. Here's a white squirrel, here's a gray squirrel. We have different colored eyes. Flowers have different colors. Sticklebacks have spines or no spines. Some giraffes have longer necks or shorter necks. Those are all examples of variation. Overproduction just simply says that most organisms have more babies than will actually live. So an eagle might have 2 eaglets, but maybe one won't survive, unfortunately. It's kind of the sad truth of nature. The one that lives will probably have the best genes, the best traits, the best adaptations. So the sticklebacks with the short spines or ones with no spines will live. So overproduction just says we have more babies than will actually go on to live in the animal and plant world. Adaptation, you're going to write this in the adaptation box, is something that allows you to better survive in your environment. So the stickleback's variation are its spine's lengths. The adaptation for the freshwater is its short spine. This camel has lots of adaptations. It carries water, really just fat in its hump so that it doesn't have to drink for a while. It has long eyelashes to protect its eyes from the dust. It has hooves to walk in this hot desert. Polar bear has white fur to blend in with the snow, but it also has black skin to absorb heat to stay warm. This snake copies this poisonous snake so that things don't bother it. So an owl won't choose to eat this, or a hawk, because it looks like a venomous, poisonous snake. The last one is descent with modification. It's the biggest term, but what all it means is if you have a good adaptation, you're going to start seeing it in the population. So more individuals will have the adaptation in every following generation. So you're going to write this down in that last box. The individuals will be better suited for survival or reproduction, as long as the environment stays the same. So right now the environment's changing with climate change. A polar bear's adaptation of white fur might no longer be good. And so if a polar bear is born with darker brown or like darker white fur, that might be the better variation for a changing world. The white fur might stick out, and then they won't be able to sneak up on the seals. So natural selection acts on what's already there. You're born the way you're born. You don't just magically grow wings and fly. So either your variation is good and it allows you to survive, or it's not and you won't survive and you won't pass on your genes. So this is what natural selection is. We kind of use the words evolution and natural selection the same. It's natural selection is how evolution happens. All right, so now you should have finished your notes up until the examples. You are going to write your own examples. You can choose a plant, an animal, a mushroom, anything that's living, and you can write an example. But I'm going to give you the example of the stickleback so you kind of know what to do for these notes. So the variation of the stickleback is you can either have spines or no spines. If you were talking about a giraffe, you could say their neck length is different. So choose whatever it is for your organism, and then write down what the adaptation is for your organism. For the sticklebacks, it's better to have no spines because you'll survive better in the fresh water. Okay, so notice how I took the variation, the good variation, and then wrote it down in the adaptation box. And then overproduction is going to be the same for everybody. Not every organism lives. So you'll write not all, whatever you choose, that are born will live. And descent with modification is that adaptation will become common. So the sticklebacks with no spines started to be really common in the freshwater because they are the ones that lived. So you are going to choose your own example, and then next class we're going to do this one more time just to make sure you have it, and I will give you a video to watch of a hummingbird, and you can write down what their variation, adaptation, overproduction, and descent with modification is. So just to be clear, for today's notes, write your own example using mine as a guide. All right.